Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. This is a two-part series with Tyler Boeddeker and Sean MacHale from Massif, who creates and produces some of the world's finest FR gear. Massif was founded in 1999 by two passionate visionaries who set the bar high for quality and excellence in everything they do. Randy Benham, one of Massif's founders, was a Jenny Lake search and rescue crew member in the Grand Teton National Park, who understood the demands of rugged, unpredictable, and hazardous work conditions. Massif partnered with a specialized Los Angeles-based knitting mill, Antex, and a core group of extraordinarily dedicated people. Together, they've invented never-before-seen FR fabrics and applied them to innovative clothing designs for numerous climates and contexts. During this conversation, we talked to Tyler, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, having served in the U.S. Navy for 6 years as a naval air crewman, with 3 deployments in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. He has multiple certifications as a rescue swimmer, search and rescue petty officer, SEER graduate, and more. Sean is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, having served 10 years as a Marine Corps tilt-rotor crew chief on the MV-22 Osprey. Sean is in tune with the aviation world. He is deployed with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit and the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2009 and Operation Inherent Resolve in 2015. Sean's a licensed private pilot. He's a skydiver and a scuba diver, but will also indulge in sailing, surfing, and any outdoor activity. In this episode, Tyler talks about a rescue operation he was a part of involving 2 pilots who ejected from their stricken fighter jet. We spend time talking about FR gear, which includes flight suits. We also get into some of the tech behind FR materials. Lastly, we talk about some of the safety considerations that go along with the proper use of flame-resistant flight suits and apparel. Thank you to our sponsors, MD Helicopters, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich, and Robinson Helicopters. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
But Sean, for you, kind of going back to your youth, was there anything that you recall that generated some interest for you in aviation?
I grew up in a household where my mother and father were both in the Navy. My grandfather was in the Navy, and they were all air traffic controllers. So I kind of grew up around air traffic control. My other grandfather on my dad's side, he flew like the B-29 Super Fortresses in World War II.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of grew up with his old war stories. And then I would go to work with mom and dad. And there we are. Like, we lived in Hawaii. I was on Pearl Harbor watching them control aircraft. So it was something I knew I always wanted to do, to the point where, like, when me and my friends would go play Army and stuff, like, I wanted to be the Huey door gunner. I wanted Flights of the Valkyrie to be on the speakers. Yeah. I wanted to be the door gunner. Like, I was always, every time we would play Army or, do anything like that, I'd be like, yeah, well, I'm the guy in the air, because that's just like where my heart was at all times. So I pointed myself at aviation pretty heavily. I think growing up, I never thought that I had what it kind of seemed like a mythical thing, flying in general. It wasn't until the military, I took all my initial tests, and that was one of the options that I was like, no way, like I can do a job where I'm in the air, and like, that's my function. I was all about it. So my parents are still disappointed I joined the Marine Corps versus the Navy, but I can say that they definitely, just growing up around them and their love for aviation, and their unique perspective being the air traffic controller versus actually behind the controls, was really unique insight, especially when I went to get my private pilot's license. I had grown up with an air traffic controller, so it made that piece a lot easier. And actually, while I was getting my private pilot's license, my dad was still controlling the Ramona airfield out here. So for parts of my solo training, when I would go do like my touch and goes and my touch and stops, I would fly out to his airfield, and my father would control me while I was getting my private pilot's license, which was super cool for both of us. Yeah, it was pretty cool for both of us.
How cool. Yeah, I think about, being a kid, and like you, I thought becoming a pilot or being involved in aviation was something that was just so far off that would never happen. Maybe just not even want to pursue it as a kid, because in my mind that was as likely as being a professional baseball player. So I'm like, well, it's not going to happen, So the fact that we all came full circle and got to be a part of it and are still in the community, it's really cool. But yeah, it is like kind of this mythical thing that, I can't do that. It's unachievable.
It was really cool to, like, as an adult, to go learn how to fly, realize how easy it really kind of is. I mean, not that it's necessarily easy, but flying a plane is, I've never flown a helicopter, but flying an airplane is almost laughably easy. Like, really, the hardest part is comms, communications. Who do I talk to? When do I talk to them? That's the hardest part. But just flying the plane comes pretty naturally after a little bit. And it was kind of that, like, remember on my first solo, just flying around at full control of the aircraft, laughing, like, check this out, like doing little maneuvers and stuff. Like, I can do that. Like, look how easy this is. This is awesome. So, but yeah, to your point, growing up, I was like, that's a mythic thing that I'll never get to appreciate.
Yeah, that helicopter experience for me was much different than the airplane. A helicopter wants to crash, and you're trying to do everything you can possibly do to prevent that from happening. So learning to fly, actually learning to hover by itself, was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done, because it's sucking up all your brain power, and then each limb of your body is doing something different. So it was really challenging. And, I remember thinking, like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. And I remember talking to my coworkers and like, no, just trust the process. Everybody feels like this. It's just part of learning to fly. And he was right. At some point it just starts to click, and you put, one good flight forward, like, okay, I didn't mess things up horribly in this flight, and then two string together, and eventually you can do it. But man, it was challenging getting to that point.
Absolutely.
I think my first solo, I was more terrified than excited, because I realized I got nobody over to help me out. So yeah, it was pretty awesome though. But that is probably, the thing I'm most proud about as far as achievements go in my life is having completed my, private and commercial, and becoming a professional pilot was really cool. So
yeah, I would say that was, I had a similar experience. I never really, obviously not a pilot, but my last flight in the Navy, we were in Iraq, and I got to actually fly the H-60.
Oh, cool.
So they, kind of just gave me controls one at a time, from collective to the cyclic, and then, adding pedals in and stuff like that. But I remember being very humbled as soon as they added the pedals in. I was just like coming around a turn and then just flying sideways as I'm trying to go straight. And yeah, it was definitely a very humbling experience from flying in the back. Like,
that's why airplanes are so easy. Like, there's a lot going on, but just not like a helicopter, you know what I mean? And then if something happens and you have altitude, you can glide.
Yeah.
So you feel a little safer, I'd say. But I have so much respect for any helicopter pilot, especially those doing hoist operations, who can hold and maintain a stable hover under dynamic conditions. Especially, you start thinking about prop rotor downwash, glancing off of a sheer face cliff, and how that interacts with the aircraft. And there's someone dangling underneath the aircraft. And yeah, I watch those videos and just complete and utter awe of those guys.
Yeah, tons of respect. I remember you talking about stable hover. I remember, so before I went to flight school, our CFI was like, okay, we're going to get you prepared to go to flight school so that when you go, you've kind of got an understanding of what everything is. And Tyler, like you, they give you one control at a time. So like you, when I get all four controls, the pedals, the collective, and the cyclic, I'm all over the place. We went to an area at Ontario Airport. It was called the Old Guard Ramp. So it's an old National Guard ramp, and it's probably about 3 football fields wide in long and length. So it's this huge open area. And my CFI is like, okay, just keep it over this one little box. It's like a 50 by 50 box. Just try and keep it in here. It's okay. Well, I see that's not going to happen. Why don't we double that and try and keep it in the double that thing? And eventually he's like, okay, why don't we just see if we can keep it on the ramp in general? So it's just it's so freaking hard. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. And I look back on that, and like I said, it's humbling. It's not something that comes easy, I don't think, to most people.
The guys who do boat operations on the Osprey too, like, so on an LHD, you have, the rotor heads are side by side. They're not one in front of the other, like the CH-46 and 47. They're out here. So one engine and one rotor head is completely off the ship. So as those guys lift, they've got one in a hoagie and one in a higgy.
Wow.
And so like the aircraft wants to do this. So not only are they fighting just, the fact that hovering is hard, they're dealing with the wind coming off the superstructure on the right side because that's in a higgy, blowing wind into the aircraft. Then this one's in a hoagie because it's 100 feet off the ground, and that's going straight down. So you just have all these forces coming at you. And then as the air crew, I'm sitting outside of the door watching the blades get this close to hitting the superstructure. Like, come left, please, come left, come left, please, come left, come left, come left. Like, it gets pretty hairy. So I got mad respect for a lot of those guys too.
Yeah. I can't imagine operating in those environments. How cool. Tyler, going back to you and in your career, reading through your background, sounds like you some really cool, you've got a really cool background in general, but a really cool, experience in a rescue situation that happened in the North Arabian Sea. Can you talk about that?
So yeah, that was a rescue that I got back in 2013. We were basically just doing our normal flight operations out there with the jets going in Afghanistan and dropping bombs and stuff like that during OEF. And it was the first time that we had deployed, the United States as a whole had deployed with the Germans. So we had, instead of the Way City DDG that was with us, it was the German Hamburg ship, which was like its first deployment ever as well, actually. And so what we were doing these good deal like PAX transfers where we would take 3 Germans, bring them onto the aircraft carrier, and then 3 Americans and bring them over to the Hamburg, and we would swap for 24 hours. We actually had a Schumacher in our shop that also subsequently the German Hamburg ship that would chalk and chain our bird had a Schumacher. And he might actually end up listening to this as well because he's still a friend of mine now. That's over cool. In Germany. But yeah, so we swapped them for a whole day. And so we just, and that one was a little, I think, maybe under the table because they were Schumachers and it was fun. But we were actually doing a passenger transfer in between our plane guard mission, which if for those of you that don't know what plane guard is, it's just burning holes in the sky. So just flying circles on the starboard side of the ship, waiting for a jet to crash, essentially. So we're basically flying around SAR capable. But for this period of time, we were not SAR capable because we were doing this passenger transfer in a fully trucked out Foxtrot, or not a fully trucked out Foxtrot, but it had the sonar relief machine still in it. So that means there's not a lot of room inside the cabin, like the Sierra and stuff like that. So 1 liter max, and you're done. No more people really able to get on board. So, well, yeah, with that, we were just doing the passenger transfer, bringing the Americans back from the German ship. And as we were taking off, we had Tower call us and told us to kind of like stand by, not to come land on the ship because they were dealing with an F-18 emergency, which at the time we weren't really questioning it too much because the F-18s, they're dealing with emergencies all the time, talking with Tower. They help, talk them through everything. So we were kind of just waiting. And then we heard them kind of continue on with this for a little while. So we just decided to do our automatic approach checks and kind of get ready for the potential of something to happen. But none of us really believed that something significant was really happening. And then we were kind of like dark in comms for a while. And then the German ship called over and was asking if we were aware of a aircraft 206, an emergency aircraft, and, kind of gave them the heads up that we were, vaguely aware. So they just told it was, what squadron, that the tail number that was on it, and that they were coming in to land. And so we started looking around, and I look outside the cabin, and I finally saw the aircraft at like the 4 o'clock, and all their landing gear was down. Everything looked fine, so I report that to the pilots up front. I'm like, hey, I got aircraft at 4 o'clock, everything is good. I don't see any issues. So nothing to worry about right now. And as soon as I said that, I just watched them eject. So you just see this poof, poof, just both guys eject. It was from a F-18 Foxtrot. So it was the Super Hornet 2-seater. But yeah, their wings, they were coming in all wings level, and all of a sudden wings started rocking, and they just ejected. And apparently what had happened was they ran out of fuel 2 miles behind the ship because they were doing in-flight refueling, and the female end knocked the male end probe off and then fought it out the engine. So they were down an engine, and couldn't refuel, obviously being low on fuel. And they were just coming back from Afghanistan. So they still had, I think, some bombs and everything like that on board the aircraft as well.
Geez.
So they actually diverted to Masira, Oman. And then once they got in comms range with Masira, I guess there was, they had the airfield was shut down due to a dust storm or something. So they turned back around to go back to the carrier. But instead of the carrier, which I think should have turned around and closed that gap and then turned back around to get into the wind so they could land, the carrier just kept steaming along. I don't know, maybe that was based on a decision, that we couldn't turn around. It's just made more sense to continue on. I'm not really sure. But so that led to them running out of gas 2 miles behind the ship. And from that, like they ran out of gas prior to ejecting as well. So I guess the pilots said they had no comms or nothing. So the NFO didn't even know that they were fully ejecting yet. It just kind of happened. But yeah, so they ejected, and then I immediately started getting dressed out, because we have to be able to be dressed out within 3 minutes. So I had my wetsuit on already, but I just had to get fins, mask, snorkel, helmet and all that kind of stuff like that on. But the ELT was going off so hard that just that screaming constantly, just pew, pew, pew. So I couldn't hear anything. I was pretty much down comms at that point and I couldn't turn the volume down. Our comm system was having a little fault on it. And so no one could control my volume. So I ended up just taking my helmet off completely and just telling my chief, like, hey, I'm going down comms. I already know what I'm supposed to be doing at this point. So I just kind of kept doing what I was supposed to be doing, getting dressed out. And next thing you know, we're on scene within like 45 seconds. And we get on scene, there's just debris everywhere. You can see the oil shleen, the schlick on top of the water from all the fuel. There's just, parts everywhere. And then you can see the NFO and the pilot. They were about maybe 50 to 75 yards apart from each other, roughly. And I got hoisted down to the first guy, which ended up being the NFO. And then he had a really big contusion on his forehead. Like his head was sticking out pretty far right there. But outside of that, he was fine. Oh, and mind you, we kind of backtrack a little bit here with a significant part of the story. We had 3 passengers on board our helicopter still with no available seats or anything. So we ended up having to break a couple of publications based on the necessity, in the moment. So what we did was we took those passengers and shoved them up in the tunnel up closer to the pilots. And so they were literally sitting on top of each other. And one of them was an MC, so a photographer on the ship. Another one was a brand new seaman. That was like his 3rd month in the Navy or something, I think, total. And then the other one was a Navy chaplain. So kind of a funny combo of people to be on an aircraft to rescue. But
sounds like the start of a joke.
Sounds planned.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. A photographer, a chaplain, watch a crash. And
yeah. Exactly. But yeah, so it was funny. They had no comms or anything. So they didn't know anything that was happening whatsoever. They just are seeing us coming into this hover. And I guess what they were thinking at the time was that it was a training event. And then we just got called on some training thing, and I was getting out of the helicopter, getting into the water, coming back up and doing all this whole thing. But they totally were thinking 100% this is just a training event.
Thank you to our sponsors, MD Helicopters. MD Helicopters is a leading light helicopter manufacturer for civil and military operators worldwide. We build safe, agile, hard-working light helicopters that consistently deliver reliable performance. As a result, our operators enjoy superior confidence, backed by durability that enables more uptime.
So when I bring the first pilot up, he's got this big old, melon, just this big contusion on his forehead. I guess, he had a little bit of blood, and stuff like that. But for the most part, he was pretty good. So I guess at that time, they were still thinking that he was, a part of a scenario. But once I got him inside the aircraft, which, by the way, I sent him up without a litter because because those guys were on board, we had almost no room for a litter on there unless it was absolutely necessary. So we discussed it as a crew that I would make damn sure that someone had a broken or, check 5 times over to see if someone had a broken back, because you suspect it automatically with an ejection that they had a broken back. So I was checking for step off. I was having to move his toes, feeling, you name it. I was trying everything to make sure that it was okay to put him up on a strop, which I was already hesitant to do in the first place, but ended up that was the option that we had to take. And so I sent him up in the strop, and luckily he was fine. But the next guy, he ended up, when I got to him, we short-hauled myself over to the pilot, And before earlier in the rescue, I yelled over to him to ask if he was okay, and he yelled back and said he was fine. But once I got to him, he was not. It was actually the worst of the two, and his thumbs were almost chopped off.
Wow.
And so he was, outside of that, he was pretty fine, but just stressed out because he was afraid of sharks, and so he kept talking about that. And I had to keep putting my head underwater and looking around to act like I'm looking for sharks, and it was crystal clear water. You could see. It seemed like 100 feet down, or something like that. There was nothing around. So I kept telling him like, hey, dude, you're fine, And then I finally realized why he was worried is because he was bleeding pretty significantly from his thumbs, and they were just kind of dangling by some skin still. And I guess when they ejected, his hands kind of flailed and scraped the inside of the cockpit. And that's what had kind of scraped him and almost cut his thumbs off there. But when I brought him up into the aircraft, I rode up with him. That is when the passengers on board realized this was no longer a training mission.
Yeah,
because there was blood everywhere. It was kind of all over me. It was all over the cabin, all over. Just it was everywhere. And so we got them, kind of gauzed up and everything real quick because it was only a short flight back to the carrier. And but yeah, as soon as I got them all gauzed up and everything, and we started flying back, I ripped their patches off and got their name tapes as my trophy for rescuing a couple of pilots. And then to this day, I think the pilot, I believe, had to get out. I'm pretty sure he was medically retired or something due to having medical or plastic surgery to get his thumbs back on and things like that. And then the other ended up continuing to fly. I think he went to Top Gun out in Fallon for a little while there and continue on. I think he's still in to this day, actually.
Well, that was going to be my question. How many beers did they buy you as a result of the rescue?
Well, that's why I'm hunting them down. I still haven't gotten one yet. That's a tradition. Post deployment, you're supposed to get a beer from them, and to this day, I haven't seen either of them in person. So it was just post rescue on the ship, and that was it.
I think that's bad juju to have the tradition and not follow through after you're rescued. So they better pay up or something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah. I'm kind of waiting to see them out of squadron one of these days while I'm here with Massif.
What a crazy story. And I saw you were awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Combination Medal and the Sikorsky Rescue Award for life-saving duties. So well done on that. And what a cool story. Like, going back to the photographer, was that photographer documenting this as you guys were doing your thing?
That's the sad part of the story, actually, is that he was apparently taking photos the entire time of the rescue with his phone, and had these photos still. And then I tried to, one of my friends on deployment, she knows him, and she tried to, he went to a different command and everything like that. And so I never ended up getting the photos. I do have one photo of the rescue, but it's like a pretty far out, grainy one from one of the guys in the shop. It was like they were 5 miles away, and he took his camera and zoomed way in, and it's super foggy and, the seas, but you can see the German Hamburg faintly in the background. So you can see the German ship and all the fog and me going up with the pilot. So it's kind of a cool one, but it's definitely not anything crisp or clear that I should frame or nothing like that, So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, for you, I know you've got quite a few stories, about a bunch of things, but as far as the missions that you were part of, were any one of those impactful that, you kind of think about to this day?
We did some pretty cool. So the MEU that I went out on, the Marine Expeditionary Unit that I went out on in 2015, dropped more ordnance on that deployment than we had since like the initial push into Iraq in like 2002-ish. We got to fly the President Obama around Kenya. And because he was going over to Kenya, Al-Shabaab was actually like, that terrorist cell was coming up from Somalia and causing all sorts of ruckus and havoc for us. So I got to do like a lot of insertion, extraction type stuff. But I think some of the coolest stuff I got to do is, we would have like reconnaissance Marines on board, and then like one guy in civilian clothing who was maybe a CIA agent. They didn't tell us who this guy was. But they would hook up a bunch of their own communication systems to like the outside of our aircraft. And then we would go spin circles just off the coast of like Iran. And they would be listening to phone conversations, like cell phone conversations. And, I'm sitting there playing Candy Crush on my phone. I'm not privy to listen to these conversations. So I'm just sitting there letting them do their thing. But, all of a sudden they'd shoot me a look and, put us down. So on a couple occasions, we would expedite the landing, and, we land and we're essentially in the way. So the the jets can't take off until we move. So we would land, we would fold up our aircraft, we'd get it out of the way super, super quick. And then the Harriers would immediately launch with rockets and bombs on them. And then they would land with no rockets and bombs. And because we all had secret clearances, we were allowed into the briefing space, and we would go watch, because all of those rockets have cameras on them with like little FLIRs. So they can switch between white hot and red hot or black hot. And we would watch those little images get closer and closer and closer until it was static. And then they would switch to like a UAV view and you could see the damage done. And so we'd be down there like hooting and hollering and cheering. And, that in retrospect, it's a little dark and morbid, but in the moment, we thought we were doing the job. But some of that stuff was very impactful because from, you can spin a lot of circles in the air, but we actually got to see, we got to go down and watch, the fruits of our labor, why we were there, what we were doing, had a direct like video attached to it, which was super cool. So, we train constantly, whether we're on deployment or back home. But to see some of that training create some real world situations and, getting the job done and getting rid of some bad guys was super interesting and pretty cool to be a part of for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anytime you can see the kind of the fruits of your labor, the end result, the end product, it's a huge benefit. I think it helps with morale. It kind of gives you some reflection on what you're doing and why you're there. So
exactly. Yep.
Pretty cool that you guys got to see that and be a part of that. I'd like to transition. The impactful stuff's great, but the funny stuff I think is always the best. Whether we've all got the same sense of humor, and it's you talked about it's pretty morbid. You kind of have to have a morbid sense of humor to do what we do, and so it's always fun to talk about the funny side of things. And Sean, we'll stick with you since we were just talking about your service. What's some of the funniest things that you can remember happening to you when you're in the military?
Well, a lot of inappropriate stories come to mind, but one of the funniest things I think that ever happened. So on the 31st MEU, which was my first deployment, I was stationed in Okinawa, and we went to Clark Air Force Base, which is an old defunct Air Force base that's out there in the Philippines now. And they still use a lot of those barracks and a lot of the headquarters buildings and the flight line. The Filipino government, and their army now uses that stuff. So this was 2009-ish. I'm in E3, Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps. I've been in for a couple years. I didn't really have much to do other than sweep and mop and clean things. So at the end of every day, so it's our first day at Clark Air Force Base. Like, we were on the ship. We did a whole movement. We took World War II era boats and kind of stormed the beach. And then they took us to Clark Air Force Base and we set up this whole shop on day one. And at the end of the day, the gunnery sergeant comes over and he's like, "All right, Mac, go round up all the trash. And when you have all the trash, come find me." So I go and I empty all the little trash bins. There's MRE trash everywhere because that's, the only food that we had while we were out there on that detachment. And I've got like 9 bags. I can barely lift them, and I have all my bags of trash and I set them down and I'm expecting that the gunnery sergeant's going to give me some reinforcements to help me with the trash. No, that wasn't the case. He just wanted to make sure that I knew where the dumpsters were. So he pulls me around the hangar and he goes, "All right, you see that path right there?" And, we're surrounded by jungle. There's a little narrow path, looks like a little walking path. And he's like, "Walk down that path. Eventually that path will open up and you'll see that there's some dumpsters. Go throw that trash away in the dumpsters." And I'm like, "Okay, that's easy day." So I gather my trash. I'm struggling because I'm not going to make 2 trips. I'm getting all of those bags of trash in one trip. So I've got some slung over me. There's trash juice dripping off of me. And I'm walking through the jungle on this little footpath and it's windy. And as I'm getting down this path, I start to hear some chatter from the jungle, like monkeys, like a little pod of monkeys. And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, we are in the rainforest. There's animal life out here." And right as I rounded the last corner and I could see the dumpsters, the first thing that stood out about the dumpsters is there's not a bit of trash in those dumpsters, but there was a lot of trash everywhere else. And right as I made eye contact with those dumpsters, that's when I heard it. The battle cry of at least 2 to 3 dozen monkeys. And they started jumping out of the trees and just bum rushed me. I kicked one. I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh, they're flashing their fangs at me. I've never been more afraid. I would rather be shot at than have to relive this again. And they straight up jumped me, and in like an organized way. They came in waves, and I was determined. I was like, I'm going to get this trash in the dumpster. So I'm running and I'm juking and I'm kicking, and they're ripping the bags. And by the time I got to the dumpsters, they had already ripped holes in all of them. I had nothing. I was defeated. I put them down and I ran my ass all the way back. And there's the gunnery sergeant just dying laughing. And he's like, I heard them. They got your ass, huh? And so,
that's great.
And I felt defeated, but it was pretty fun. And then I talked to like an old master gunnery sergeant later on that night who had been in the Marine Corps for like 22 years at that point. And he's like, yeah, back in the 80s, we used to form a posse, and like 9 of us would go back there, and we get into these big brawls with the monkeys. And like, apparently it's tradition to go like get in a little 1950s-esque gang fight with these monkeys. But that gunnery sergeant knew what was going to happen to me, and he sent me in there alone and unafraid. And I promptly came running back defeated. So that was probably a pretty good one.
That's freaking great. Yeah. It's funny. On social media, I've seen a lot of videos lately of tourists getting their cell phones or something stolen, and the monkeys won't give the thing back until they've gotten food or something that they want. Mm-hmm. I think one of the ladies got her cell phone stolen, and she tries to give the monkey banana, and he takes banana and throws it and won't give her the phone back. And I think she had like a piece of candy or something and he gave the phone back. But those things, that's wild.
Oh, they're smart. I'm telling you, they came in waves. They were distracting me over here. Like I was not their first victim, and I could tell.
Man, I feel like that's someplace the military needs to put a camera, kind of like a trail cam, and just get all the different fights that take place between the guys taking trash, like their first time. That's the new initiation is the trash run.
I always promised myself if I went back, that was like the first thing I was going to do. Is like, okay, where's a Lance Corporal? I got a mission for you, buddy.
Well,
That's
Tyler,
where Hollywood is missing out big time on hidden camera shows within the military. That is for sure.
Well,
for sure.
Yeah. A lot of that we couldn't air. So
yeah, that's true as well.
Well, Tyler, how about for you?
Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
Yeah, I mean, I would say kind of the same thing to that note. I think everybody in the Navy knows that most of the stories are not really PG quite often, but some of the ones that are kind of more on that PG side that stick out was a lot of the good deal flights that we would offer as on the Navy side on carriers. If there's a pretty benign starboard D flight where we're just burning circles in the sky, we would allow people on the ship, anybody on the ship, could submit a special request chit for a good deal flight. So there's many jokes that would go in with that as well. Like we'd mess with the ops LPO or something like that and put a bunch of fake names and, things along those lines that were inappropriate. Those jokes of
like Seymour Butts.
Butts.
Yes, exactly. And he'd be calling commands, like talking to chiefs, asking for petty officer Seymour Butts and, stuff like that, and wouldn't catch on to it until he was just chuckling in the background or something, So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. But my favorite was just playing the jokes on all of the people trying to get the good deal flights. So just, really, it's a morbid way of showing the capability of the MH60. Yeah. So a lot of times, the best was in the hotel. I think that's another reason that was my favorite helicopter within the 60 platform was on the Sierra. The seats were forward and aft facing versus the hotel. They were starboard and port facing. So you can put them on the port side with the troop seats, and they're just like this, cloth 90-degree angled seat. But when your feet are relaxed and you have your toes kind of, there, your toes are literally at the edge of or touching the door when it's closed. So you're like right there at the edge of the bird. And So I remember one time, and we would do stuff like this all the time, but this one sticks out specifically, which it was like a group of 4 different girls that were cruising with us, and they were all like seamen, E3s and E4s maybe. So pretty new to the Navy still, and not really any experience with aviation whatsoever. They were part of the ship and whatnot. So we put them in the aircraft, and I put I always ask like, who's scared, and so I put them in the more scary spot. And instead of trying to cater to them, you really just look for the weak points and expose them further. But yeah, so we put them right in the door side, because the port side of the aircraft doesn't have a door. It was just windows on that side. So what we would do is, on this flight specifically, like I could tell the girls were getting pretty nervous, and so I told my pilot at the time hey, we got a pretty nervous one back here. We should do something fun, and he's like, all right, what side? I was like, oh, we got right side. And he's like, roger that. And so he starts speeding the aircraft up, and we drop a little bit in altitude. So we're, 100 feet off the water or so, and start cruising pretty quick. And so we do a right side course reversal, and just put, the door just parallel to the ocean essentially. And so she's just looking straight down and sees nothing but water, no more sky, no nothing, it's just water. And, she just started screaming and was just looking for something to grab. And I'm sitting in the troop seat in the aft part of the aircraft, right next to the right seat door. And I'm in my UDTs, which is those little tiny tan short shorts that we wear as a Navy swimmers and stuff, with a long sleeve shirt. So my thighs are completely exposed, only like 6 inches down is cloth, and everything else is just leg. And she grabs my leg so hard and just squeezes, and there was straight up a complete handprint bruise after she got done squeezing my leg. And she was so mad afterwards. She was borderline puking and stuff. And that also, was another fun thing. If people are going to puke, you kind of, I'm not cleaning it up, and I don't want my maintainers to have to clean it up either. So we definitely make sure that it's one of you're going in your shirt kind of thing.
We'd make Marines take their Kevlar off. They'd have to take their helmet off and go inside their Kevlar.
Oh, the soup bowl.
Yeah. The soup bowl. Yeah. If you're on a military aircraft and you're turning green at the gills, just know that the entire crew is talking about it, and then they're actively they're trying to get that blister to pop. They wanted it so bad.
That's funny.
Yeah.
The funny stuff that we all get to do and see is what makes what we do so fun. And as you transition out, you forget about the things that sucked, and you remember the things that were funny and impactful. That's why I like to bring those things up, because it's fun, to talk about. And so anyways, you kind of brought up, wearing shorts. You guys, we call those silkies? Is that refer to those shorts?
Yeah, Marines and like reconnaissance men, they wear silkies, which are those short shorts. The UDTs, think Top Gun, the volleyball scene, and they're all wearing their dog tags and those little tan shorts.
Okay.
They're the little tiny little short shorts. I mean, you see them on like Navy SEAL recruiting posters from the 80s and stuff. Like it's what they used to wear before Navy SEALs were Navy SEALs. They were frogmen. It was their underwater demolition team shorts. And so it's just a really low profile, nothing to get snagged on pair of shorts. So as those guys were swimming in and out of minefields and deactivating minefields and stuff, they would wear those shorts. And there's not much left to the imagination if you're doing PT in a pair of those without underwear,
Cold, leave me alone.
This picture up there, maybe get a gist, but those sweet quads right there.
There you
those
go.
Are EDTs.
Right on. I think that's kind of a good segue into talking about some of the flight apparel that we're wearing in public safety aviation and in the military as well. Can you talk about the importance, when able, of course, the rescue swimmer is a little different, but the importance of wearing FR gear, not only in flight, but for some of the ground-based operations that we're a part of all the time?
Flame resistance is definitely one of those things that historically has had a bad rap in general from like a weight and heat perspective. And usually a lot of that comes from like the early Afghanistan, Iraq timeframe, from ground guys wearing one-piece flight suits because they didn't have anything else that was FR. one of the common things that we hear quite often is like, well, if we get into a crash or whatever, like at that point, being on fire is the least of my worries. And I definitely can understand that point of view. But I do definitely disagree with it to a pretty large extent. But and the reasoning behind that is that I go around, we see a lot of people and read a lot of studies into victims and, historically on the medical side, what that looks like from a standpoint of, having a burned patient and how bad that can really be, and surviving that and what that is like the rest of your life. It's quite significant impact to your life and your family and things like that. So if you do, make it beyond these points, like it's really nice to see that, clothing, like we've seen photos, of burn victims where their skin, where they were wearing a Massif combat shirt, and then their hand, the difference, their hand is completely burnt up, but in red and, at its best case scenario. And then anything where the FR clothing was totally normal. And so I know that it certainly helps quite a bit, and it certainly helps the longevity of your life and being able to continue to, when you do survive, to go water skiing if you wanted to go snowboarding, to ride a motorcycle, you're still going to have stretch to your skin, all these different things that people don't really think about once they get to that point, and, we think about that all the time. So it's definitely important to me. I think it's important to a lot of people at Massif. But at the same time, we're not just an FR company either. We do non-FR clothing as well for a lot of the ground side people when they're training, a lot of the military side. FR is mostly for a lot of communities, necessary for anything outside of the wire. So when they're in those combat zones versus training, if you're not using live munitions of, many different forms, FR or breaching courses and stuff like that, FR isn't maybe the necessary added expense that they want to be paying for. So we also make non-FR stuff for those training events, or, where maybe you're outweighing the benefits of FR might be outweighed with cold, like your exposure to cold weather might be really significant, and that could be your primary focus. And when we focus on cold weather systems as well. So, and we do FR cold weather systems to back that up with, outside the wire and aviation systems and things along those lines. So it definitely has its place, and it's definitely here to stay. And we firmly believe in it. And as a Massif as a whole, we definitely are one of the innovators of FR apparel, not just as from a technical design standpoint, but from a fabric side. And that's, I think, a bigger part that a lot of people don't really realize about Massif is that, we're owned by a fabric mill. So, and they're our parent company. So we get to not only work with them to develop futuristic fabrics, but we also have a fabric chemist and a fabric technologist in-house that we work vertically seamlessly with them to create and innovate all these different FR apparel fabrics from many different perspectives, leveraging partnerships within the industry from that same thing, from for woven fabrics, where we might not specifically make them as proprietary, but we do have a large enough footprint that we can work with them to adjust these fabric blends and make them not only perform from a FR standpoint, but from an actual movement and hot weather, cold weather, humid weather, all these different environmental factors, that gear should be working no matter what. So
yeah.
That's a big, thing for me. And I'll let Sean kind of talk to his side if he wants.
You made a good point early on is a lot of aviators or people who are in job fields where they might need that added layer of protection. You hear it all the time. Like, well, if I crash my aircraft, then, I'm dead anyway. So what does it matter if I'm wearing FR clothing? Well, yeah, unfortunately, falling out of the sky, it has a detrimental effect on the human body. But if you do survive, or let's say something catches on fire where you're on the ground and there is no crash, now you're just engulfed in flames, those extra seconds are critical. And not only does it provide you extra protection, it keeps your mobility intact. That's another thing that people fail to realize is a lot of clothing shrinks under a flash fire event. Under those extreme conditions, it shrink wraps you. And if you're wearing like a nylon or, like a polyester, something that's going to melt to you, that makes it even worse. FR doesn't only give you a few added seconds of protection, it also gives you the mobility to blow the hatch on your emergency exit. to undo the straps that are keeping you connected to the thing that's on fire. That alone is huge, because the last thing that you want to realize when your aircraft is getting engulfed in flames is that, oh, I also can't move my arms or legs. You know, it's a scary feeling. Now it's like that Swiss cheese effect, right? You just have one calamity overlapping another calamity. And the biggest facet of FR is just, you know, it's not going to shrink wrap you. It's going to give you those few extra seconds to egress the aircraft. And because we utilize Nomex in 90% of our FR apparel, you know, that creates a really slow heat transfer. And that's why Nomex is so good at what it does, is it doesn't transfer the heat as quickly from the fuel source to your skin. So that's why you get those added seconds, and every second counts. And if I'm in an aircraft, it's not going to take me long to get out of it if it's on fire. Unless, of course, I'm wearing something that has frozen me completely, or didn't protect me long enough and I'm already, you know, a hard-boiled egg. So we take it very serious, and we get a lot of pushback from different communities on the importance of, or, you know, talk to anybody who's ever been a part of a flash fire event, whether they're a maintainer or an aviator. Those few seconds are crucial, and have saved a lot of lives. Sometimes the conditions have to be correct for it, you know, to be a benefit. So I can look at it at a lot of different angles, and I can understand the frustrations from some of these commands who don't want to pay so much money for that added level of protection. But man, I firmly believe that I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. You know what I mean?
And the technology behind FR is really fun too. I mean, it is really fascinating to watch a mannequin burn test or something like that, where it just gets engulfed with flames. We have jackets at our headquarters that have already been burned, and, you know, our elements jacket specifically, for instance, you know, beyond the membrane in that fleece lining, it looks totally fine, like normal. You know what I mean? Like everything below that jacket is like it never even was in a fire. It's quite amazing. But yeah, the difference between FR, no melt, no drip, and non-FR, you know, they're all quite significant. And you see it a lot, you know, from a cotton t-shirt standpoint, you know, that a lot of agencies and aviation groups stick to, which is 100% cotton. That's not a blend or anything like that, you know. But no melt, no drip, that basically means only that, right? It'll burn, but it won't melt and it won't drip. Flame resistance is where, you know, it is actually self-extinguishing. So it doesn't melt, it doesn't drip, and it self-extinguishes. So when you watch, you know, these burn tests, it almost looks fake, like as if it's like a oxygen controlled room or something, where it lights on fire and then they suck the oxygen out of the room, when in reality it's more of just the chemical reaction of the fabrics, you know, and yarns that are burning, off-gassing and sucking that oxygen, being, you know, basically killing that fire, which is extremely fun to watch. And that technology piece that we get to continuously be dabbling with in-house, and burn testing and working with NC State to do all of these tests and stuff like that. You know, it gets really tech heavy and gets really complex. And it's definitely cool to see how much actually goes into fabrics. It's not just like, oh, let's mix a little of this and a little of that and see what happens. You know, it's like actual chemists, scientist level side of the house. So it's pretty cool.
There's a lot of companies that are marketing no melt, no drip, and they're not saying it's FR, but they're just not using the proper language. So there's a lot of people that we talk to at these shows as we go around who think that no melt, no drip is the same as FR because of marketing campaigns from different companies. And that's a really huge note when it comes to FR versus no melt, no drip is no melt, no drip will keep you from being shrink wrapped, right? But FR is self-extinguishing. So once you remove yourself from that flame source, the garment puts itself out. There's no need to, stop, drop, and roll. I probably still would, because I'd be freaking out because I was just in a fire.
You still want to stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah. I'm not saying cut that out.
But it's going to do pretty good.
Yeah, but it's crazy because, once you remove yourself from the fuel source, no melt, no drip continues to burn. It continues to create the oxygen and everything that it needs. There's still a fuel source. There's still oxygen at the root of that fabric. So it's still going to continue to burn, whereas the way Nomex reacts under those conditions, it cuts the oxygen out of the fabric, which self-extinguishes the garment. So they're very different. It's two different types of technology. So just one thing for everybody who's in a field where they do have to wear FR or should be wearing FR, but they're going no melt, no drip because they think it's just as good. It's not. It's better. It's better than nothing, but it's certainly not the same.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Yeah, I brought up Brian Smith earlier. He has the safety program, or spent 10 years running the safety program at APSCON or APSA. And I went through his class. I was a safety officer in my unit. And a good portion of that class is dedicated to PPEs. And a lot of that is talking about the consequences of crashes. A lot of times in a post-crash incident, you're going to have a fire, whether it's a flash fire or a sustained fire. And we spend a lot of time going through photos and videos of these things, and you see the folks that get out, and it's pretty horrific to see the injuries they deal with, and not just in the moment. It's post burn injury recovery and what that does to their life long term. I remember after attending that class and going back to work, I was really, really good about not just having my FR gear on, but have my collar popped up and then wearing my gloves. I was pretty bad about wearing gloves prior to that class, but yeah, seeing pictures in video of the folks who didn't have gloves on, like you're saying, you could see they'd take their shirt off, their chest, their arms are fine, but where their gloves are, their hands are jacked. So I was pretty good about wearing my gloves after that. Actually really good. I did not want it to happen to me, and I think we've all got this kind of mindset that it'll never happen to me. Well, that's not the case. And it's interesting going through that. And Brian did a really good job of promoting that through the safety program at APSA. But it is interesting to see there's a lot of agencies that still don't fly with, they fly with regular, cotton apparel or blend stuff. And I don't know if it's a money issue or just a lack of knowledge, but my hope through having you guys on this conversation is just to bring a more awareness to the concept of wearing FR gear and the importance of that, and the fact that it, not only could potentially save your life, but it'll save your quality of life, if you survive a crash and an incident. Because we all want to
absolutely,
continue doing our thing and being healthy and productive as we get through these careers. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on wearing FR gear and wearing it properly, because I didn't for a long time. So,
yeah.
And
it is a big cost thing. That seems to be the biggest headache for these smaller departments and agencies. It's just, how do you justify spending this much more on a t-shirt versus this t-shirt, which is no melt, no drip. So it's essentially the same thing, right? And it's like, no, it's not. It's not. But it sucks. I wish I could sprinkle funding on everybody so that everybody could afford it, whether they're buying it from us or elsewhere. It doesn't matter where you're getting it from. That's not a Massif plug. That's just a gear plug. Spend the money, buy the right stuff.
I understand most agencies, money is always in short supply. We're always asking for new items, whether it's safety wise, aircraft wise, pay raises, all those things. So money's in short supply, but given this is our professional career, I'm willing to spend my own money. If the agency's not willing to spend money to buy me a new suit, I would spend my own money, And luckily I worked for an agency that did provide all that stuff. But, I would, if I had to buy a new helmet, I'd buy my own new helmet. If I had to buy my own FR gear, I'd buy my own FR gear, because that's what's protecting our ability to continue doing the job if something happens. So
that's a mindset that's always perplexed me, as a lot of guys are like, well, I'm not spending my own money on it, so I'll just wear this dangerous stuff, because if they're not going to buy it, I'm not going to buy it. And it's like, cool, whatever. I mean, it's your money, spend it how you want. But to me, if this is my career and I'm going into harm's way as much as I'm going into harm's way, yeah, I'll spend the money. That's my mindset. But
yeah,
it shouldn't be that way. You should be provided the proper gear. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But at the end of the day, if you're not being provided the right gear, it's worth the investment.
Yeah.
Because if you ever need it, you're going to wish that you had it, for sure.
Yeah.
part that I have found interesting as well is that a lot of people, to include myself, right, which is that, we will go to REI and, spend $400 or $500 on a jacket, or some gear because it's a hobby that you enjoy, but you use them once a month or not even in their intended use, right? Like getting a rain jacket or the pussies, and not using them on backpacking trips or climbing and stuff, So there has been this like almost like a standard that sets the bar of expensive gear lasting, 5 to 10 years. But what a lot of people aren't thinking about that, when I ask questions and talk to a lot of people is that when they are wearing these garments that we're being compared to in the recreational world, they're not wearing them inside of an aircraft with cotter keys and, all this mobility, and you're not wearing it every single day. You're not washing it continuously. If you were to take those same hard shells, puffy jackets, or, pants, anything, and you go, elbows and knees through the ground, you're going to tear it up. If you, take your Patagonia Nano Puff or something inside of an aircraft, it's going to rip within the first day or flight or two, And so with us, what the big thing is we try to make this really high performance, flame resistant or non-flame resistant, high performance apparel made in the United States with US sourced everything. Nothing comes from outside of our territory. And we make it for people that wear it every single day in the world's most challenging environments. You know what I mean? So our gear does hold up very well there, and it can be expensive, but it's no different than the price of what you're paying for something when you go and wear it a couple of times a year. This is what you're wearing every single day. And instead of it being just this pickle suit that is kind of dictates how you use it because it's been around since Vietnam, we're taking this more utilitarian approach where the flight suit is ambidextrous, that it works for all these different utilitarian focused kind of, features and things like that. But all on top of that, the feature set of the durability, the FR protection, the burn injury prediction ratings from the fabric, and then adding, Kevlar mesh venting into the pocket so that you can actually cool yourself and not be super hot while maintaining that performance of protection and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of standards that from FR to performance and everything that gets kind of mixed between our professional and our recreational lives, I guess you could say. And I think that bridging that gap is important. But on top of that, just acknowledging how often people actually wear this stuff and how useful it can be in your day-to-day job. If you're wearing something different every day where, when you hit that emergency and you need to pull something or you got, a flight card or whatever, when seconds matter, wearing something different and reaching for a different pocket, all those things matter, when you're everything else we do, in America, it's a game of 1% now. We're just always looking for these little wins where I would say our flight suit adds more than a 1%, by far. When it comes to rescue, our flight suit pant has large Don-Doffing zippers and fly zippers. I can throw that on over a size 13 boot with a large pant and save, 2 minutes off of response time because I don't need to put my boots on. Yeah. So there's just all these little things where we're looking for those 1% that end up being, maybe 20% faster to a response, or, just that you now have muscle memory based on an ambidextrous flight suit instead of you being left-handed and you were always reaching for a right-handed pocket, just all of those things. It's a really focus-driven product, and we try to do that by translating from the end user to our design team and back and forth. So it's a big deal for us.
Yeah, I think that's what you get going back to the end user thing. When you have a product that's focused on the end user, I think is you get a high quality, high performance product like what you guys have developed. It's been really cool seeing you guys, your product lines continue to develop. So like I said, when I started researching the flight suits, this was probably 2014, and we were just coming out of the one-piece flight suit into the two-piece flight suit. And man, I hate those one-piece flight suits going back. But the two-piece flight suits are great. And I remember, we're working up in the hangar where the airport was. It's really hot in the summer. And if you're in a one-piece flight suit, you could, take the top off. You'd have to tie the arms behind your back. Inevitably, it'd fall down and it would drag through the dirt. And was a pain. So being able to take the 2-piece flight suit top off and work with, just your t-shirt on made working environment so much better. But I remember going through when I was doing all the evaluations on the different flight suit companies, most companies at the time had a kind of a demo process to where you could contact a company, say, I'm looking at this product for our unit. And they would send a sample of their, whatever their stuff is, and you could use it as part of an evaluation. Do you guys have that? Is that still part of the process?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. We're really big with that. We like the product to speak for itself, right? Like we put in all the work so that the end user doesn't necessarily have to. So we do like the product to speak for itself. We don't like to sell you something that is not going to work for you. So we will send out T&E items. So it's a test and evaluation set of some kind, depending on what it is that you're looking for. And we can send those samples out, and depending on availability and all that kind of stuff. But we'll work with you guys and sending those and how many to send out. Usually it's no more than like 2 sets or something, depending on, the size of the command or unit and stuff. But yeah, we just send an evaluation link with that so that we get feedback from the end users, so that it's not essentially an opportunity wasted. So even though we are on version 2 of the flight suit, based on end user feedback from fit to feature sets, you name it, as we kind of branch into this law enforcement world that, Sean has been really breaking open significantly, that really helps, right? It helps us gain a new customer's feedback from different perspectives. You guys fly on many different platforms, smaller aircraft, so there's always going to be little nuances that we can learn from as well. So getting that feedback from the law enforcement, search and rescue guys on the civilian side, all of it's really helpful, and a big part that we do play. We want you guys to wear it. It's not just a sample that you hold and look at, like wear it around, check it out, and let us know what you think ultimately.
Yeah, I remember getting the 2 different flight suits, and that was important for me because if I'm going to recommend a product, I wanted the recommendation to come from someone other than myself, in addition to what I said. So I remember the other person that would test the product with me, we both were like, oh, this stuff is awesome. So having 2 people that can speak to the quality and performance of the flight suit was really important. So I think it's smart that you guys do that. And I love that you're able to help these agencies out that, just to spend $1,000, say, on a flight suit, if you were to buy that for your whole unit without knowing or having the opportunity to test it out to begin with is tough. So having the chance to test it out at really no cost to them to begin with is huge. So for folks that are looking to develop their own programs, they're looking for more safety equipment, the flight suits, how could they get in touch with you guys? How could they find out information on getting a demo and all that?
I mean, the quickest way is if you go to the website under Contact Us, depending on what organization you're affiliated with, we have a breakdown of all the sales reps that cover which territories. We don't do a regional thing. It's like I cover down on the Marine Corps. I cover down on the entire Marine Corps. That's not a regional thing. So it's all laid out right there. All of our phone numbers are right there. Email addresses are right there. Whether you email or call, we're all very responsive. So yeah, we're very easy to get a hold of. And if you can't find that, the customer service, links are all right there on the website as well, and they can get you to us. So just go to the website, call any one of the numbers on there, and I promise you'll figure it out. Like we'll get you where you need to go. Absolutely.
Right on. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for all the fun stories and talking about all the stuff that you guys have done. That's been a lot of fun. And then for Massif, I really love what you guys are doing to promote safety in our industry, and not in kind of a boring way. Like you guys talked about, the apparel is something I would wear outside of work, and there's not many companies that you'd be willing to do that. A lot of stuff's like, oh no, I'm not, like those green jackets, that is not going anywhere. So the fact that you guys have come up with a product that not only performs, but looks well and all that is huge. So thank you guys. Look forward to catching up at one of the conferences. I'm sure Echo this next year, and hopefully at HAI or something like that. So until then, we'll catch you soon.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll be there. Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it, Nate. We appreciate what you do. Getting some of these conversations started and getting this information out to all these different communities is is huge. So we appreciate you as well, man. So thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. All right, we'll catch you later. This is the end of part 2 of the series with Tyler and Sean from Massif. And we're starting a new segment called Ask the Expert. This is a segment where we ask you all to send in questions specific to public safety aviation. We'll then call an industry expert and ask for a roughly 5-minute response to the question. So please send your questions in that we can use for this segment. If you go to verticalhelicast.com and find the contact page, you can then submit a question in the topic or idea text box. Stand by for our first Ask the Expert segment after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsors, MD Helicopters. MD Helicopters is a leading light helicopter manufacturer for civil and military operators worldwide. We build safe, agile, hard-working light helicopters that consistently deliver reliable performance. As a result, our operators enjoy superior confidence, backed by durability that enables more uptime. Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Hey, welcome to the first Ask the Expert segment. The first question came in via LinkedIn. To answer the question, I'll call our good friend and co-host, Jack Shanley.
Hello.
Commander.
Hold on. Gracie, it's for you. I'm just
Hey, Commander, thanks for answering the phone. We had a fan write in and ask a question pertaining to gunfire and aircraft operations. So the question is, looking at what other law enforcement helicopters deem safe, in quotations, altitudes, when small arms are observed in jobs, USA is probably the most likely to have shots fired at the helicopter. UK police have a 2,000-foot altitude requirement for suspected small arms fire, but I can't find where that height was derived. UK is also one of the safest countries for gun crime. So for the expert, do you have any suggestions on considerations that come into play when you're dealing with working a call and small arms fire?
Sure. My answer that frustrates people, especially newer people in law enforcement, to a lot of tactical things is it depends. And people get frustrated with that because they think you're waffling or you're not making commitment. But any tactical instructor worth their salt is never going to tell you, well, this is what you do. For that, you do it this altitude, this airspeed, this whatever the tactical situation is. It could be a building search, and I would say it depends a lot. So let's talk about what it depends on. It depends on the type of call. It depends on how much information you have about someone being armed. It depends on the weapon that's being described. Are they describing a handgun or are they describing a long rifle? Two completely different scenarios there. But what it comes down to for air crews really is altitude and airspeed. Altitude and airspeed. Are you working off a gimbal? Are you working with your eyeballs? That's going to help determine some of that as well. Now, airspace limits you on some of that. I worked in a place where we were limited at or below 900 in an area where there was a lot of guns and a lot of gunfire. So we didn't have a whole lot of choice there. So what did you do? Airspeed. So we didn't have the altitude luxury of going as high as we want. We had jets landing at LAX over it. So airspeed would be the tool that we would use to keep, to try and avoid a situation where we could be hit. But no matter what you do, it's possible to get hit by gunfire. So precautions are smart. It's something that partners need to talk about. And a TFO needs to tell their pilot, hey, this is what I got. How high can you get me there? And find out what the pilot says. And airspace and weather and all those factors come into play. So it's easy to say, well, we're going to do it at this altitude and this airspeed every time we go to a gun call. Impossible. There's too many other factors. Or you would have to say, well, then we're not going. Well, we are going. So that's my basic answer in a nutshell. It depends, but airspeed and altitude are both things that you try to control, but you have to work the call as well. So you have to be in a position where you can still work the call using smart airspeed, smart altitude within weather and airspace limitations, and just do your best to avoid that.
I love the answer. The "it depends" is really the most appropriate answer for something like this, because, like you said, there's so many factors that go into consideration when you're talking about this subject. So I think that "it depends" is absolutely the right answer. And there's tons of stuff to talk about when it comes to this. This could be a whole episode by itself.
We sure could.
For me in the area that I worked in, the ATC was very liberal with our altitudes. I think anything above 3,500 MSL, they would hand us off to SoCal. But below that, they would stick with us and they could authorize us to go up to that altitude. So 4th of July, Christmas Eve of all holidays, and New Year's Eve, we would fly patrol very high. And you talk about some of the things that allowed you to do that, and you brought that up, was technology, the camera systems. Those are crucial pieces of technology that allow us to operate at those altitudes and still be effective in the job.
Absolutely. Technology has really helped in that area for sure. There was a long period of time in Los Angeles where there was zero air support flying between 2300 and about 0100 on New Year's Eve. And the reason was very simple. The amount of automatic gunfire in the 80s and 90s was outrageous. There used to be a tape floating around that you could listen to that was a tape taken from 77th Police Station rooftop. And I would put that tape up against any firefight I've ever heard in war, and you would be able to tell the difference. It was that heavy in the 80s. That has changed, but there's less of that gunfire because of a lot of reasons. But there was a time when, on patrol, you would park underneath freeway overpasses and air support didn't launch.
Yep.
Just for safety, because we knew there was a lot of lead flying in the air.
Yeah.
We wanted to try and avoid that.
Well, it's still a tradition in my agency that every New Year's Eve at midnight, all the patrol units meet up for about 10 minutes in a covered parking area. Yep. And we take a photo and we celebrate for about 2 minutes. And then you watch all the calls stack up, and then you respond to all the calls that stacked up.
Exactly. I worked many New Year's in patrol and at air support, and it was crazy, the amount of gunfire. And it was just the prudent thing to do, was to protect yourself for a little bit when the heaviest stuff was, and then go out and do your job. There's no reason to be taking undue risks unless it was really, really a hot call, and then you went.
Right. Like Mike Daly talks about, flying is inherently dangerous, and we're just looking for ways to mitigate some of that risk. So that's right. This is that. So, hey, thank you, Jack, for taking the time to answer and ask the expert in this new segment. Look forward to hearing more about this as we go forward. Until then, we'll catch you later.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.
All right. See ya.
Time to close up the Hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.